Hey, I'm pretty happy with that. All right, Tits McGee. Let's do it. Let's go. Everybody else listening out there, camps out of land. Get a personal shout out. Look at you. Look at you. Lucky boys. Lucky boys and girl. You can't. You sick. Mm. Oh. Right. Well, that's probably for the best. Okay. And the good morning. Is the camera slanted? And we are now live, top of the morning to you on this bold, blessed, and beautiful Sunday. It is 6:15 a.m. in the morning. We have been up before Jesus and the Mexicans. Okay, this is your favorite Irish immigrant coming to you live from West Hollywood. We are reading today chapter 9 of House of Leaves by an author's name who, his name's Mark Z, Mark Z. Danny Wiltsky. All right, Mark Z. Dan Wiltsky. I've had a lot of conversations with the pronunciation of that name with my father over the FaceTimes. It is what it is. Okay. Last week we enjoyed chapter 8. It was fantastic. This week it's Sunday. We're getting into the highlight of the entire week. Speaking of highlights, I know the Met Gala was last week and there was lots of cool fashion things going on and there's lots of beauty tips on how to recreate the makeups. I just like to say how nice it is of like minimal makeup and natural beauty. And with that, like I just got to give full compliments to the um, goddess of enchantment that is Leanna Lovings. All right, if you don't know who that is, I highly recommend everybody out there that's watching this, the hundreds of thousands, the tens of millions, um, do yourself a favor and check out on the Googles Leanna Lovings. She's arguably the most visually beautiful woman on the planet. There you go. Anyway, I'm a big appreciator of art. That's why I like reading books like this. That's what you'll notice about the few personal items I have in my life. Mont Blanc plans, Cartier watches, these kind of things. Chapter 9. Let's get to it. I'm going to rest the microphone on the broadness of my collarbone. Yeah, that works. Here we go. Oh, fantastic. We're starting off with Latin. Hec labea le demos et in exspicitus error. Laborus exodus domos. Laborus and endemorum. Oh, Lord Almighty. Great. Let's just make a fool of myself in the first 2 minutes of the proceedings. Here is the toll of that house. An inextricable wandering adhered, the house difficult of exile, of exit, difficult to enter. Fragments of ancient scholar, Virgil presented in Latin, Galore's Thomas ancient lore, in medieval Latin glossiers, London publication, universities publication. In fact, all of this was quoted directly from Penelope Reed Dott's The Idea of the Labyrinth from Classical Antiquity. Through, son of a bitch. I apologize. Let me sit up straight so that it does not slide down my pec. There you go. You can see it there bouncing. Is that it? There you go. My tete. That's my tete. A perfect example of how Zamboni likes to obscure the secondary sources he's using in order to appear more versed in primary documents. Actually, a woman by the name of Tartarian turned me onto that bit of info. She'd been one of Zamboni's scribes, and lucky for me, she told me over the phone, still and among other things, some of the old book lists he'd requested from the library. I do have to say, though, getting over to her place was no easy accomplishment. I had trouble just walking out my door. Things are definitely deteriorating. Even reaching for the latch made me feel sick to my stomach. I also experienced this awful tightening across my chest, my temples instantly registering a raise in pulse rate. And that's not the half of it. Unfortunately, I don't think I can do justice to how truly strange this all is, a paradox of sorts, since on one hand I'm laughing at myself, mocking the irrational nature of my anxiety, that I continue, in fact, to perceive a complete absurdity. I mean, Johnny, what do you really have to be afraid of? While on the other hand, and at the same time, mind you, find myself absolutely terrified, if not of something in particular. There were no particulars as far as I could see, then of the reaction itself, as undefinable and impeachable as Zamboni's black trunk. I know it makes no sense, but there you have it. What should have negated the other only seemed to amplify it. Instead, excuse me, my 6:30 alarm is going off. Normally I would be going outside to meditate with the sun doing its rising thing. Anyway, here we are. Of course I was fine. Amplified instead. Fortunately, or not fortunate at all, Thumper's advice continued to echo in my head. I accepted the risk of cardiac arrest, muttered a flurry of fucks, and charged out into the day, determined to meet Tatiana and retrieve the material. Of course, I was fine, except that I started walking down the sidewalk. I watched a trunk veer from its lane, flatten a stop sign, desperately try to slow, momentarily redirect itself, and then, in spite of all the brakes on that monster, all the accompanying smoke and ear puncturing shrieks, it still barreled straight into me. Suddenly, I understood what it meant to be weightless, flying through the air, no longer ruled by that happy dyad of gravity and mass until I was landing on the roof of a parked car, which turned out to be my car, a good 15 feet away, hearing the thud but not actually feeling it. I even momentarily blacked out, but came to just in time to watch the truck still hurtling towards me until it was actually slamming into me, causing me to think, and you're not going to believe this. I can't believe this asshole just totaled my fucking car. Of all the cars on this street, he had to fucking trash mine, even as all that steel was grinding onto me, instantly pulverizing my legs, my pelvis, the metal from the grill wedging toward like kitchen knives, swerving me from the waist down. People started screaming, though not about me. Something to do with the truck. It was leaking all over the place. Gas. It had caught fire. I was going to burn, except it wasn't gas. It was milk. Only there was no milk. There was no gas. No leaking either. There weren't even any people. Certainly none who were screaming. And there sure as hell wasn't any truck. I was alone. My street was empty. The tree fell on me so heavy it took a crane to lift it off. Not even a crane could lift it. There are no trees on my block. This has got to stop. I have to go. I did go. When I reached Tatiana's place, she'd just gotten back from the gym and her brown legs glistening with sweat. Oh, Santa Maria. Oh my God. Um, she wore black spandex shorts and pink athletic halter top, which was very tight and still could not conceal the ample size of her. But holy Jesus, this is hot stuff. Oh my God, Santa Maria. Um, I said hello and then explained. I'm sorry, just the thing of like women sweating, like for a woman to actually exercise that much to break us. I mean, just anyway. Um, I said hello and then explained again how I had come into possession of the old man's papers and why, in my effort to straighten them all out, I needed to trace some of his references. She happily handed over the reading list she'd compiled on his behalf and even dug up a few notes she'd made related to the etymology of labor. When she offered me a drink, I jokingly suggested a Jack and Coke. I guess she didn't understand my sense of humor and understood it perfectly. She appeared with the drink and poured herself one as well. We spoke for another hour, ended up finishing all of off all the Jack. And then right out of the blue she said, "I won't let you fuck me. Time to get going," I thought, and began to stand up. Not that I expected anything, mind you, but if you want, you can come on me. Oh my God, she added. I sat back down, and before I could think of something to say, she had tugged off her top and stretched herself out in the middle of the floor. Her tits were round, hard, and perfectly fake. As I straddled her, she unbuttoned my pants and then she reached for some extremely aromatic oils sitting on her coffee table. She squeezed hard enough to release a thin stream. It dripped off of me, a warm rain spilling down over her toned belly and large brown nipples. Pleased with what she'd done, she settled back to watch me stroke and grind myself into my own hands. At one point, she bit down on her lower lip, and it amped me up even more. When she started to caress her own breast, small groans of pleasure rising up from her throat. I felt the cum in my balls begin to boil. However, only when I got ready to climax did I lose sight of her, my eyes slamming shut, something I believe now she's been waiting for, a temporary instant of darkness. we're, we're vulnerable and blind to everything but my own pleasures. She could reach up. She, she could reach up beneath me and press the tip of an oil soaked finger against my asshole, circling, rubbing until finally she pushed hard enough to exceed the threshold of resistance, slipping in. Oh my God, slipping inside me and knowing exactly where to go. Jesus. Heading straight for the prostate, the P spot, the loud button on its pumping stereophonic fuck system. I never knew I had, initiating an almost unbearable scream for and of pleasure, endorphins spitting through my brain at an unheard of rate, as muscles in my groin almost painfully contracted in an handful of heart stomping spasms. Not something I could say I was exactly prepared for. I exploded. The stream of white went the stream of white flying across her tits, strings of the stuff dripping off her nipples, collecting in pools around her neck, some of it leading as far as her face, one glob of it on her chin, another on her lower lip. Jesus. She smiled, started to gently rub my semen into her black skin, and then opened her mouth as if to sigh. Only she didn't sigh. No sound, not even a breath, just her moon bright teeth, and finally her tongue licking first her upper lip, before turning to her lower lip, where, where smiling, her eyes focused on mine, watching me, watching her, licked up and finally swallowed my cum. So sorry. Jesus. Um, there's a reference up here. Having already discussed in chapter 5 how echoes serve as an effective means to evaluate physical, emotional, and thematic distances present in the Davison record, it is now necessary to remark upon their deceptive limitations. In essence, echoes are confined with large spaces. However, in order to consider how distance within the Davison house are radically distorted, we must address more complex ideation of convolution, interference, confusion, and even decentric ideas of design and construction. In other words, the concept of a labyrinth. It would be fantastic if, based on footage from the Davison record, someone were able to reconstruct a bunla for the house. Of course, this is impossibility, not only due to the wall shifts, but also the film's constant destruction of continuity, frequent jump cuts prohibiting any sort of accurate map making. Consequently, in lieu of schematics, the film offers instead a schematic rendering of empty rooms, long hallways, and dead ends, perpetually promising but forever eluding the finality of an impromptu the finality of an immutable immutable layout. Curiously enough, if we can look to history to provide us with context, the reasons for building labyrinths have varied substantially over the ages. For example, the English hedge grower maze at Longleat was designed to amuse garden party attendants, while Admeedman III of the Xi dynasty in Egypt built for his Monterey temple, a labyrinth near Lake Munir to protect his souls. Okay, well, that's cool. German for building plan. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Wow, on to the next page. There's lots of red lines, lots of lines crossed out in red, as you can clearly see. All right. Oh my goodness. The microphone fell on my manhood. Oh, I like that rhyme. That's a good one. The microphone fell on my manhood. It did it again. Okay, let me have a little sip of coffee while we're here. Bastard. Mm, 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 mm. Oh, oh, mm. Love me. I love me my coffee. Um. Okay. Son of a bitch. There we go. Stay there, you little bastard. However, even as Holloway, Roberts, Jed Leader, and Wax Hook make their way further down the stairway in Epsom, the purpose of the vast place still continues to elude them. It is merely an arbitration of physics, some kind of warp in space, or just a tipulary labyrinth on a much greater gender scale. Perhaps it serves as funereal funeral purposes, conceals a secret, protects something, imprisons or hides something, some kind of monster, or for a matter of imprisonment or hides an innocent. As the Holloway team soon discover, answers to these questions are not exactly forthcoming. They're going to get through this maze and it's going to be a hot chick that they all fuck. Note, struck passages indicate that Zamboni tried to get rid of, but which I, with a little bit of turpentine and a good old magnifying glass, managed to resurrect. I've no idea why these titles and cited sources are different. It seems much too deliberate to be an error, but since I haven't been able to find the flyer, I don't know for certain. I did call Ashley back, left a message, even though I still don't remember her. Okay, so turning the page. We turn the page. Oh my God. Oh my God, we're back again. It is too complex to adequately address here, For some, however, this mention alone may prove useful when considering the meaning of play, origins, and end, especially when applied to the Davison House. And then there's lots of Latin, which I'm, going to spare you me trying to interpret. And then later on, more Latin. And then here's the English, the best I can do. The function of a center was not only to orient, balance, and organize the structure. One can, in fact, conceive of an unorganized structure, but overall, to make sure that the organizing principle of the structure would limit what we might call the play of the structure. By orientating the organization and coherence of the system, the center of the structure permits the play of its elements inside the total form. And even today, the notion of a structure lacking any center represents the unthinkable itself. And later on, this is why classical, though concerning structure, could say that the center is paradoxically within the structure outside of it. The center is at the center of the totality. And yet, since the center does not belong to the totalitary, is not part of the totalitary is the center of elsewhere. The center is not the center. Are we clear? Are we making that clear? Something like that. From Jacques Derrida, Structure, Signs, and Play in the Disclosures of the Human Sciences, in Writing and Difference, translated by Alan Bass, Chicago University Press. Penelope Reed Dope avoids the tangled discussion of purpose by cleverly drawing the distinction between those who walk within the labyrinth and those who stand outside of it. Maze traders whose visions ahead and behind, in severely constricted and fragmented, suffer confusion, whereas maze viewers who see the pattern whole from above or in diagram are dazzled by the complex artistry. What you see depends on where you stand, and thus, at one and the same time, labyrinths are single. There is one physical structure and double. They sim they simultaneously incorporate order and disorder, clarity and confusion, unity and municipality, artistry and chaos. They may be perceived as a path, a linear but circuitous passage to a goal, or a pattern, a complete a complete symmetrical design. Our perception of labyrinths is thus intrinsically unstable. Change your perspective, and the labyrinth seems to change. Metaphors for life. In terms of spontaneous perception, man's space is subjectively centered. The development of schemata, however, does not only mean that the notion of center is established as a means of general organization, but that certain centers are externalized as points of reference in the environment. This need is so strong that man, since remote times, has thought of the whole world as being centralized. In many legends, the center of the world is concertized as a tree or a pillar, symbolizing a vertical axis mundi. Mountains where Mountains were also upon the point where sky and earth meet. The ancient Greeks placed the navel of the world in Delphine, while the Romans considered their capital as Capitula Mundi. For Islam, Kabula is is still the center of the world. Elaid points out that in most beliefs it is difficult to reach the center. It is an ideal goal which can only attain after a hard journey. To reach the center is to achieve a consecration and imitation to the profane and illusionary existence of yesterday. There succeeds a new existence, real, lasting, and powerful. But Idale also points out that every life, even the least eventful, can be taken to the journey through a labyrinth. Huh. Right, more coffee. Just a little sippy sip. Is anybody in the okay? Mm. Beulah, anyone? Unfortunately, the dichotomy between those who participate inside and those who view the outside breaks down when considering the house, simply because no one ever sees the labyrinth in its entirety. Therefore, comprehension of its intricacies must always be derived from within. This not only applies to the house, but to the film itself. From the outset of the Davison record, we are involved in a labyrinth, meandering from one celluloid cell to the next, trying to peek around the next edit in hopes of finding a solution, a center, a sense of whole, only to discover another sequence leading in a completely different direction, a continually devolving disclosure, promising the possibilities of discovery, while all along dissolving into chaotic ambiguities, too blurry to ever completely comprehend. In order to fully appreciate the way the ambages unwind, twist only to rewind, and then open up again, whether in the Davison's house or the film Que Allitere Ambiguous. Okay, we should look to the etymological inheritance of a word like labyrinth. The Latin labor is akin to the root libi, meaning to slip or to slide backwards, though the commonly perceived meaning suggests difficulty and work. Implicit in labyrinth is a required effort to keep from slipping or falling. In other words, stopping. We cannot relax within those walls. We have to struggle past them. Hugh, a saint, Hugh of Saint Victor, has gone so far as to suggest that the antithesis of labyrinth, that which contains work in Noah's Ark, in other words, that which contains rest. Cheeky, cheeky. Oh, it's my own fault for not sitting up properly. If the work demanded by the labyrinth means penetrating or escaping it, the question of process becomes extremely relevant. For instance, on the way out of any maze, it is simply to keep one hand on the wall and walk in one direction. Eventually, the exit will be found. Unfortunately, where the house is concerned, this approach would probably require an infinite amount of time and resources. It cannot be forgotten that the problem possessed by exhaustion, a result of labor, is an irrestricable part of any encounter with a sophisticated maze. In order to escape, then, we have to remember we cannot ponder all paths, but must decode only those necessary to get out. We must be quick and anything but exhaustive. Yet, as Seneca warned in his Epistolae Morales 44, going too fast also incurs certain risks. Quoted Evalente in Labyrinto Prodeteuse uspe. Oh wait, why am I reading Latin to you? Because I'm committed to the work. Unfortunately, the antifracticity of some labyrinths may actually prohibit a permanent solution. More confounding still, its complexity may exceed the imagination of even the designer. Therefore, anyone lost within must recognize that no one, not even a god or an other, comprehends the entire maze, and so therefore can never offer a definitive answer. The Davison's house seems a perfect example. Due to the wall shifts and extraordinary size, any way out remains singular and unapplicable only to those on the path at that particular time. All solutions then are necessarily personal. Okay, cool. This is what happens when you hurry through a maze. The faster you go, the worse you are entangled. Words worth taking to heart, especially when taking into account Pascal's remark found in Paul de Man's Allegories of Reading. Si on de la vedure emelate à la raison. If one reads too quickly or too slowly, one understands nothing. LTP enumérer héros vesquer essayer irriter alader poture tanta es fachitete. So Dislis made those innumerable winding passages, and was himself scarred, able to find his way back to the place of entry. So deceptive was the enclosure he had built. Horn's Gregory, however, offers a slightly different translation. So Darius designed a winding stair, and as one entered it, only a wary mind could find an exit to the world again. Such was the cleverness of that strange Abor. Abor. Arbor. Abor. I'm not sure why, but I feel like I understand this on an entirely different level. What I mean to say is that the weird encounter with Tantian seems to have helped me somehow, as if getting off was all I needed to diminish some of this dread and panic. I guess Thumper was right. Of course, the downside is that this new discovery has left me practically beside myself, by which I mean paraplegic. Last night I made the rounds. I called Tatiane, but she wasn't home. Amber's machine picked up, but I didn't leave a message. Then, as the hours lengthened and a particular heaviness crept in on me, I thought about Thumper. In fact, I almost went down to where she works, to that place where I could be alone with the falling light and shadow play, where I could peek in ease, unhurried, unmolested, a notion which, as suddenly as it crossed my mind, made mine suddenly, and for no apparent reason either, made me feel terribly uncomfortable. I called Lude instead. He gave me Carrie's number. No answer. Not even a machine picked up. I called Lou back, and an hour later we were losing ourselves in pints of cider at Red. For some reason I had written me a little bit Zamboni wrote about Natasha, see Apex 8th. I found it some months ago and immediately assumed she was an old love of his, which of course may still be true. Since then, however, I've begun to believe that Zamboni's Natasha also lives in Tolstoy's grueliest pages. Yes, amazing enough, I finally did get around to reading War and Peace. Anyway, that evening, as coincidence would have it, a certain Natasha was dining on vegetables and wine. Rumor was, or so Lude confided, I've always loved the way Lude could confide a rumor. Her mother was famous but had been killed in a boating accident. Unless you believed another rumor, which Lude also confided, that her father was the one who had been killed in a boating accident, though he was not famous. What did it matter? Either way, Natasha was gorgeous. Trotsky's prophecy brought to life. Lude and I quarreled over who would approach her first. Truth be known, I didn't have the courage. A few pints later, though, I watched Lude wave over to her table. He had every advantage. He knew her, could say hello and not appear obscene. I watched, my glass permanently fixed to my mouth so I could drink continuously. Though breathing proved a bit tricky, Lude was laughing, Natasha smiling, her friends working on their vegetables, their wine, but Lude stayed too long. I could see it in the way she started looking at her friends, her plate, everywhere but at him. And then Lude said something, no doubt an attempt to save this snitch. Little did I know I was the one being sacrificed. That it was until he started pointing over at the counter at me, and then suddenly she was looking over at the counter at me, and neither one of them was smiling. I lifted the base of my glass high enough to eclipse my face and paid no mind to the stream of cider spilling from either side, hilarious, foaming on my lap. When when I lowered my deception, I saw Natasha hand Laird back a piece of paper he had just given her. Her smile was curt. She said very little. He continued the charade, smiling quickly, and departed. Sorry, Haas, Lude said. He sat down, unaware that the scene had turned me to stone. You didn't just tell her that I wrote that for her, did you? I finally shuddered. You bet. Hey, she liked it, just not enough to dump her boyfriend. I didn't write that. A blind man wrote that. I yelled at him, but it was too late. I finished my drink and, with my head down, got the hell out of there, leaving Lude behind to endure Natasha's pointed inattention. Heading east, I passed by Muse and stopped in at El Coyote, that's where everyone buys cocaine, by the way. El Coyote, where I drank tequila shots until an Australian gal started telling me about kangaroos and the Great Barrier Reef, and then ordered something else, potent and green. A while ago, over a year, 2 years, she had seen a gathering there of very, very famous people speaking sensually of things most preserve. She told me this with great glee, her breasts bouncing around like giant pacemen who cared. Fine by me. Did she want to hear about Natasha, or at least what a blind man wrote? When I finally walked outside, I had no idea where I was. Orange lights burning like sunspots, initiating weird riots in my head, while in the ink beyond the chorus of coyotes howled, or was that the traffic? And no sense of time either. We stumbled together to a corner, and that's when the car pulled over. A white car, VW or Rabbit, maybe, maybe not. I strained to see what this was all about. My Australian gal giggling, both pacemen going crazy. She lived right around here somewhere, but wasn't that funny. She couldn't remember exactly where. And me not caring, just squinting, staring at the white car as the window rolled down and a lovely face appeared, tired perhaps, uncertain too, but bright nonetheless, with a weary smile on those sweet lips. Natasha leaning out of her car. I guess love fades pretty fast, huh? Winking at me then, even as I shook my head, as if that kind of empathetic shaking could actually prove something, like just how possibly it is to fall so suddenly, so hard, though for it to ever mean anything to have to remember. And I would remember, I would definitely remember, which I kept telling myself as that white car, her car, sped off. Bye bye, Natasha, whoever you are. Wondering then if I would ever see her again. Sensing I wouldn't. Hoping sense were wrong, but still not knowing. Love at first sight having been written by a blind man. I'll bet, sly, passionate too. The blind man of all blind men, me, don't know why I just wrote that, though I would still love her despite being unblind. Even if I had all of a sudden started dreaming then of someone I'd never met before or had known all along. No, not even Thumper. Whoa. Am I wandering maybe Natasha after all? So vague, so familiar, so strange, but who really and why? Though at least this much I could safely assume to be true, comforting really, a wild abode mentioned at New West Hotel over the wine infusions, light lit, softened on the very entertainment moods, yawning in return, open insight, inviting everyone's song with me, losing myself in such a dream over and over again, too, until that Australian gal shook my arm, shook it hard. Hey, where are you? Lost? I muttered and started to laugh. And then she laughed, and I don't remember the rest. I don't remember her door, all those stairs to the second story, the clatter we made making our way down the hall, never turning on the lights, the hall lights or her room lights, falling into the function of her floor. I can't even remember how all our clothes came off. I couldn't get her bra off. She finally had to do that. Her white bra. Ah, the clasp was in front, and I'd been struggling with the back, which was when she let the pace man out and ate me alive. When I know, yeah, I know, the dots here don't really connect. After all, how does one go from a piece of poetry to a heart wrenching beauty to the details of a drunken one night stand? I mean, even if you could connect those dots, which I don't think you can, what kind of picture would you really draw? There was something about her pussy. I don't remember that. In fact, it was amazing how hairy it was. Thick coils of black hair covering her, hiding her, though when fingered and licked, still parting so readily for the straddling straddling my mouth, and all of the time easing slightly back, pushing slightly forward, even when her legs began to tremble, still wanting me to keep exploring her like that, with my fingers and my lips and my tongue, the layers of her warmth and sweet folds in her darkness, over and over and over. The rest, I'm sure, I don't remember though. I know it went on like that for a while. Up in the sky high, off the side eye, all of us now sigh. Right down the drain, aye. Just ditty, I guess. Let me see, oh wow, we have a massive commitment for the rest of, Jesus Christ, the chapter. Um, what am I after getting myself into here? Holy mother of God. Here, man.